What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're making your first country bread in a Dutch oven. Dutch oven bread. I want to make bread and I want it to come out good the first time. So we're going to make a Dutch oven sourdough loaf. By the end of this video, you should know how to make bread dough, stretch and fold your dough, form it into a large loaf, and then bake it in the Dutch oven. There's a few essentials you're going to need for this recipe: some sort of cast iron or enameled Dutch oven, a stand mixer, a big bowl, and parchment paper. The Dutch oven will let us create the effects you'll get when baking in a commercial bread oven or a hearth baking with a hot floor and steam. We are also using a sourdough starter for our bread to give it some flavor. If you don't have it, don't worry, we'll link one below in this video so you can have it. The night before you want to create your bread, so you're going to want to create your starter. The starter is a way to kickstart your wild yeast as well as give it a thriving environment for your sourdough bacteria to grow. Combine 71 grams of a sourdough starter of your choice with 142 grams of all-purpose flour and 85 grams of whole wheat flour. Then pour in your 227 grams, about a cup of warm tap water. Let it sit overnight in a bowl. I like to use a clear bowl where I can see the whole thing bubbling away. Generally, after about 6 to 8 hours, you will be at the peak of fermentation and ready to use it for our bread. The next day, you can start by combining 681 grams of flour, yeast, and your warm water mixture stuff, 13 grams of diastatic malt, as well as the sourdough starter you left overnight. Mix the ingredients together for 2 minutes on stir or on low with the paddle attachment until you have no flour left. Then cover the dough with a rag or plastic wrap or let it sit for about 30 minutes. I used to never do this, but the process is called Autolyze, and it helps to build the part of the bread that makes it stretchy. An Autolyze is the gentle mixing of flour and water in a bread recipe, followed by a 30 to 60 minute rest period. After the rest, the remaining ingredients are added and the kneading begins. This simple pause allows for rather magical changes to occur in your bread dough, increasing the stretch and the stretchiness of your dough. The flour fully hydrates. This is particularly useful when working with whole grain flour because the grain softens as it hydrates, reducing the negative effects on the gluten development. Gluten bonds begin developing with no effort on the part of the baker, and the kneading time is consequently reduced. The dough becomes more stretchy, which allows it to expand easily. This leads to easier shaping, greater loaf volume, or a more open crumb structure, and also it cuts open more fully. After 30 minutes, your dough will already have a little bit of stretch. From here, you're going to want to add your salt. Then we're going to use the dough hook and mixer to go through 2 kneading sessions. The first session, your mixer is going to run on medium-low for about 3 minutes. We want to relax our dough for another 5 minutes, letting our dough keep its stretches. Our last kneading session with our mixer and dough hook for about 4 to 5 minutes will complete our kneading for our dough. For about an hour and a half, you're going to want to perform stretch and fold every 15 minutes. Form your ball up into a dough and put it into a cast iron dish and cover it. We're going to do what is called a stretch and fold for our whole batch of dough. This will build the stretch of our dough and make sure it springs up well in the oven when it cooks. This also is a great way to make sure your dough is cohesive and having the same amount of flavor and ingredients throughout. Pick your dough up and stretch it until it feels like it's about to break and fold it onto itself. You can continue to do this from each side of the pan. Cover again and do it every 15 minutes for about an hour and a half. We're going to flip our dough onto our floured surface. Take the top edge and form a triangle by stretching it up as much as you can, and then the bottom to form the bottom of the triangle. Then roll the top of the triangle onto itself, rolling it downwards about halfway. From here, you can fold in both of the bottom corners into the middle, forming a smooth, soft ball underneath. Roll your ball over and push and pull on the bottom of the ball until you formed a smooth top to your dough. Take a big bowl and cover it with a linen cloth. Sift some rice flour onto the linen cloth to help the dough from not sticking to the linen. From here, you can let it rise for about 4 hours on the counter and bake it or let it sit in the fridge overnight to slowly ferment and become more and more flavorful. The next day, 4 hours before baking your bread, take your pre-shaved bread out of the fridge and put it on the counter. We're going to want to temper our bread, letting it come up to room temperature so it can cook evenly through. 1 hour before baking your bread, place your Dutch oven into your oven and set it to 450 degrees. We want to preheat our Dutch oven so that it acts like a hearth oven itself. Once an hour passes, take your Dutch oven out of the oven and open the lid. You can take a layer of parchment paper and flip your dough onto it. Cut slits onto the top of the bread using a smooth, sharp knife and then drop it in the Dutch oven. Place the lid on top of the pot and place it back into the oven and turn the heat down to 425 degrees. We're going to want to bake our bread for about 12 minutes at temperature, and then we're going to rotate the Dutch oven and bake another 18 minutes. This will make sure your loaf is getting an even heat and color. For the last 15 minutes, open up the lid of the Dutch oven and let it cook uncovered. This will give us the wood fire oven, slight charred on top, and that flavor that you just can't get from the store. Once your bread is done, you can flip it onto a rack to cool. With a loaf this big, you're going to want to leave it for about 6 to 8 hours. Don't get too excited to cut into it. You're going to want to let it sit. You can even let it sit overnight. Well, you're going to want to let it sit overnight. This bread came out a fantastic country loaf. We love our bread with our huge holes that ooze out. Whatever you want to put onto it, there's nothing like a homemade taste and smell of bread. The smaller holes that are spread out are ideal for every slice of bread, putting butter on it and enjoying it. This is like my favorite kind of bread with a little bit of tea. I mean, it totally sounds very Ukrainian. With a little bit of tea, butter on a piece of toast is just like to die for. There's nothing like a homemade taste and smell of bread. Thank you so much for being a part of our channel. Make sure you like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram for the behind the scenes.